So thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. So my name's Shauna from Learning Glass Europe. You may have received some of my emails. And this is our first actually teaching with a Lightboard webinar. And we have today our key guest speaker, who is Lewis Matheson, who you should be able to see on his Learning Glass Lightboard at the moment. Lewis is an experienced physics teacher, and he runs a very successful online physics channel, is very popular on YouTube, and he's been using the Lightboard now for a little bit. So he is here to tell you about his experience. And Lewis, I'll let you get on with the show.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so it's great to have so many people here this afternoon or this evening, depending where you are watching around the world. Yeah, my name is Lewis Matheson. I suppose I'm really here by accident. I was a full-time teacher, and I taught in England, and I taught physics. And I suppose accidentally, I realised that when I was teaching my students, there weren't always really good videos that I could send them to have a look at outside of lesson time. So I got a very simple camcorder. I started recording sort of 5 to 10 minute long videos that were basically the same as what I was doing in my classroom. And then I put them on YouTube, and that was probably about 7 or 8 years ago now. And since then, I've left full-time teaching. I have a YouTube channel, and I have a couple of websites. So I suppose, yeah, that's kind of my story, really. And when I was a teacher, I found that something that a lot of the time I spent doing was, writing things out on the board. I found actually that as I did more teaching, I moved away from just using PowerPoint lessons. And I'm sure everybody here has been in maybe a CPD session or a training event where it's just death by PowerPoint. Now, the reason that I didn't really like doing that with my students was because partly I was never organised enough to actually do a full PowerPoint for the lesson and then save it for the next year. But also, I found that when I was delivering content, if you give somebody a huge amount of information on the screen all at once, with maybe 20 bullet points on a slide like people tend to do, it's actually very hard for the students and other people to take on board that information. And I found it much more effective to build things up one bit at a time. Now, the other thing I was using when I was a teacher was a visualizer. And this was very much probably about 10 years ago now. And it was something that I could set up on my desk at the front of the class, and I could just write by hand. The students could see this then displayed on the board, so everybody in the class could see that. And again, this is kind of very much the kind of technology that I was brought up with when I saw lecturers at university writing on overhead projectors. But there's definitely something about the written form, about the fact that you can write something down by hand, while at the same time actually watching the students, making eye contact with them, looking for the bits that they understand and the bits that they're maybe not so clear about. And I think that it's not particularly maybe the newest idea, but I think some of these basics of good teaching really allow people to learn. So it could be that you've got a class of students at school. It might be that you're doing online tutoring. It might be that you're maybe delivering something in person, or even developing or delivering training to another set of adult learners. I definitely find that by writing things on the screen, it really explains more than just talking about it or just putting up a load of data. Now, of course, at the moment, I'm doing the thing I shouldn't be doing, which is just talking at all of you. And at the moment, I'm sat here in an office, and I have a Lightboard in front of me. So this is something that I found can, I suppose, marry the thing of having that kind of face-to-face talking, as well as having a way to display information without it getting in the way of that learning. So this in front of me is a Lightboard. Very simply, it's a really big sheet of glass. Okay, so this is the sheet of glass, and all you need to do is write on a piece of glass using one of these pens. Okay, and I'll explain more about the kind of the technical side of this later on. Now, around this, there are a load of lights. So there's basically a strip of LEDs, and what these are doing is they're illuminating me at the moment. So I'm kind of sat over here somewhere. Again, excuse my very basic drawing. And on the other side of the glass, over here, I have a camera. Okay, so that's basically my not very good 3D picture of a camera. And so what's happening as I'm presenting at the moment, I'll just move that out of the way slightly, is the camera is looking through the glass at me. And all I need to do then is I need to write on the glass, and here's the picture I've just drawn, actually written on the glass. Hopefully that's not too confusing. And this is being illuminated and it's being picked up by the camera. So there's lights which are illuminating me. And these, on this light board, are these white LEDs. And also, there are some blue LEDs which are on the inside of the light board, and they're basically shining into the glass. And that means anything I write on the light board is being illuminated. Now, of course, what I was teaching my students was a load of physics. I was a physics teacher. My YouTube channel is called Physicsonline. And if we think about what happens in maybe, and a lot of you might know this if you are teachers as well, a lot of you might remember this from when you did GCSE or A-levels yourself, is if you have a block of material and you shine a ray of light into it, as that ray of light goes into the material, we have something called refraction, and this is when that light will change direction. And then as that ray of light moves from the glass back out again, it might change direction again. So we have this thing called refraction. Hopefully that diagram is fairly standard and a lot of you might realise it. Now, if you have maybe a semicircular glass block and you shine a ray of light into it, there's going to be a point where that ray of light doesn't actually exit the glass block, and instead it can actually reflect off the inside. Now this is something called total internal reflection, and it's used to really good effect in things like optical fibres. So in an optical fibre, you basically have a long, thin piece of glass, and what you can do is if you shine light into this, that ray of light can actually bounce off the inside and it stays trapped within it. And that's the way that I'm speaking to you at the moment. That's the way that you can hear me. We're using a kind of fibre optic broadband, and what we have are a load of signals which can travel along these optical fibres. Now, most of the time, we want to keep the light on the inside, but sometimes we find that if the optical fibre is bent through a certain angle, or maybe if there's a bit of dirt on the surface, that actually allows some of that light to escape. And that's really what's happening with the light board. Now, you can see that it's quite nice to draw pictures on here. You can easily wipe out the things that you've just finished with, just like if you were presenting on a board. But effectively with the light board, what we have is a piece of glass, and it's being illuminated at the bottom. So this is my light source at the very bottom. And what that's going to be doing is going to be shining light up into the glass. Now, most of the time, because the light is going straight upwards or maybe at a shallow angle to the glass here, that light stays inside. But if you have something on the surface of the glass, maybe like the ink in this pen, that means that some of the light from here is going to be refracted out of this, and then we can pick this up with our eyes. So hopefully the science is not too complicated, but effectively anywhere on the surface of this glass where you have something like the ink, it just means that the light inside can escape. And this is something that it's just beautiful, I think, to be honest. It's something that is colourful, it's visual, and I think that the effect that you have is kind of almost magical, but it doesn't get in the way of the learning. So for example, although initially you might go, how are you writing? For example, when I was writing the word light, I wasn't actually writing the word backwards. So that's the most common question I get, including from some very senior physics teachers I've actually met, and they said, how do you write everything backwards? Because you might get a couple of letters, but when you start to explain things, how do you write backwards? Well, simply, I'm not. At the moment, I'm actually the other way around, And so although this looks, for most of you watching, like my left hand, I'm actually writing with my right hand. And all I do is I just do a horizontal flip of the image so that you see the mirror reflection of me at the moment. Now that means, as you're presenting, which I'm sure you will have done beforehand if you're writing in the board, for example, you don't really have to learn any new skills. All you have to think about is the content that you're actually presenting. And that's why it's really easy to get used to this. So yeah, I'm not writing backwards. Instead, all I do is I flip the image over, and anywhere that there's ink on the board, some of the light is escaping out. So I found that this was particularly useful because when I did this with some online sessions, where I did some live streams with students, and also where I've delivered quite a few sessions with teachers, although initially you might have a couple of questions, you can very simply and easily get over the technology. It's not something which is a fad. It's not the kind of thing that gets in the way of delivering the content. Once students or teachers realise that you're writing the correct way around, you can easily get onto the actual content that you're trying to deliver. Now, the setup I'm using at the moment for this is I'm using a program called OBS. A lot of you might have been familiar with this, and it's just a way that you can take an input from maybe a webcam, and then you can output it to a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting or something like that. Now, OBS doesn't have to be used. There are some advantages, like for example, up here, I put on this logo for my channel, which is physicsonline. And all I did when I connected up the camera was I just went to one of the settings, I did a horizontal flip, and that means that everything you see looks to be correct so that nothing is reflected the wrong way around in the image that's going out there. So at the moment, we can just use something simply like a webcam that you're probably used to using if you've been doing any presenting online. The other thing I found it useful for is pre-recorded videos. Now, this is what a lot of people might have tried, especially in the pandemic when suddenly people realised they couldn't do face-to-face presentations. It's something that I found really useful for YouTube. And the way that I do those videos is I film on a digital SLR. So hopefully you can just about see that camera there. So I've just got a camera. In front of that, on the lens, I actually have a Polarized filter. So this lens here just means that you don't see any reflected light from the screen that's in front of me. Because one danger that you have is if you're filming in a dark room and you've got a light source like a monitor, that's going to be reflected from the learning glass back into the camera. So let me just do a quick picture of that. So this is like a side view. That's the learning glass. That's me over here. And we've got the camera over here. And all I have is this filter that goes in front of the camera lens. And that means that my monitor, which is just underneath the camera, although there's light that's bouncing off the screen back towards the camera, the filter itself actually filters out this reflected light. And that's because the light from a monitor is actually what we call polarized. And that means effectively all the light is vibrating up and down. And if we put a horizontal filter in front of that, again, this is a bit of A-level physics, very, very briefly, the kind of roughly what's going on, is if you have a horizontal filter, it filters out that vertical light, and that means that you don't see the reflected light in front of you coming back onto that screen. Now, if you like this side of things, if you like making videos or you like experimenting with technology, then using a digital SLR camera, using a filter and recording some videos gives you a lot of freedom, because it means that for the first 3 or 4 takes, when you mess it up, you can delete those things in some kind of post-production. You might be using something like Premiere Pro. And again, it's very easy to take that image that you film and actually just do a horizontal flip. You flip everything around, and then everything is really kind of straightforward to edit after that. But you don't have to go that far. You can just use your webcam, or you can even use a mobile phone. And especially now with the way that cameras are getting better and better on phones, you can just use an iPhone or something like that to record the video if you want it pre-recorded, or you can just use a simple webcam to actually output it onto your PC if you're doing a call a bit like this. The other thing that I suppose I'm doing is I'm doing this in front of a black background. Now, when it looks on the screen like this, I think it looks fairly professional. I've just got a simple black t-shirt on, and behind me I've got a black screen. But if I was to just undo it, all it is a piece of black material. I actually just found a piece of Lycra. I bought it off eBay for £15, and then I've got this stretchy bit of black material that just makes a black background behind me. And I found that that's really nice because it means that when I'm writing with the pens, they really do show up quite nicely. Something I actually did in a video that you might want to have a look at. I did a video the other day on my YouTube channel, which is physicsonline, and I talked about 42 equations that they don't show students in physics. Now, for that, all I used was a big piece of material that, again, it's a big piece of Lycra. It's got this spacey background on behind it, and I experimented with this, and I found that even though it's not a completely black background, it still shows up the material that I was actually writing on the board. And I think if you do want to have a look at that in your own time, we can probably send a link out afterwards. With this video that I did, most of the comments from students are actually about the physics rather than the technology, which I think just demonstrates that it's something that you can use with students, and it means the technology doesn't get in the way of delivering the content that you want to. The other thing I found, because there are these lights that kind of illuminate me, and that means you can actually show real things. So I, again, tend to use quite a lot of Lego to kind of illustrate things or bring things to life. And again, you can show real things. They show up really well against that black background. And these are just being illuminated by the light. So here we have a car, for example. And I suppose if I just turn the white lights down just to the side of me, I can actually take those lights out completely. And you can still see what's on the board that I'm writing. And if I turn the lights back up again, I'm afraid you get to see me again, but you can adjust those lights to either illuminate you or make you a bit darker if you really want to focus on that text. So yeah, I found that in a darkened room with a black background and a polarizing filter over the lens, I found I could get really good quality images and video that didn't need too much editing. And I think, like I said at the beginning, the advantage of this is that you're not just giving the students or the people that you're presenting to a PowerPoint and then there's maybe a small talking head in the corner. I've seen lots of those, and I found those particularly boring to watch. Even if the content was quite good, just watching somebody reading a PowerPoint slide for 5 minutes wasn't always the most engaging. I found that if I could present like this, it meant I could actually make eye contact with the viewers. I could focus on the words, and I could then build up a picture one stage at a time, and that meant you weren't just delivering too much information too quickly. So yeah, this is the Lightboard. I definitely enjoy using it. It's something that I suppose when I first saw it, I thought that seems a bit magical, a bit unattainable for me, but it's something that now I've got it, it's definitely something that I use quite a lot, and I'm definitely going to be using it a lot more in terms of work solutions for students. So yeah, hopefully that's a bit of a brief kind of recap of what it is, and I'm very happy to take some questions.
Great, thanks very much, Lewis. That was really interesting to hear. So we have one of the questions is actually from Mustafa at the moment, which is, can it be used for face-to-face teaching? I don't know if you want to answer that, or I can also chip in now I'm on my...
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think, again, it depends on the kind of setup you've got. I could see it definitely being something that, you know, something like saying, could you use OHP for face-to-face teaching? Well, I think you could, you know, you can project the OHP onto a larger board. And something like this could be particularly useful if you had maybe a lecture theatre or maybe a larger kind of classroom where you could have the setup near the front of the lab or the front of the lecture theatre. You could write things and explain on it, and that means that could then be projected maybe on a large TV screen behind you or onto the board behind you. And that might mean that people near the back can actually see what you're writing, because I've got quite bad eyesight. I did have laser eye surgery about 20 years ago now, but I still wear glasses, and I find that if I'm sat at the back of a lecture theatre and I see people near the front writing on the whiteboard or on the blackboard, I find it very difficult to see. So I can see that you could use this setup quite easily in a face-to-face kind of scenario.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I just want to add as well that so when the learning glass was invented, it was also invented by a physics teacher based in the US, and he used it always in a hybrid setup.
Okay.
Students in the class as well, just watching it on a monitor, but still getting that benefit of the face-to-face, like actual face-to-face contact through a screen, unlike using whiteboards or blackboards where you just see the back of someone's head for a little bit. We have quite a few questions from Alyssa.
Yes.
So I think both Lewis and I can speak for this because we both use it quite a lot. So firstly, how does the light shining directly on you sitting in the dark affect your eyes? Do you get headaches at all?
I've actually found that in a way this is a lot more soothing than my other setup, because the other setup I tend to use in my videos is I have a white background behind me and like a white piece of paper. And when I turn all the studio lights on, actually that's even brighter because I've got, I guess, like a light to the left of me, I've got a light to the right and a bigger one in front up there. So I haven't found any issues with this with eye strain. Definitely, I think I probably find more issues in terms of my own editing and like staring at a normal computer screen compared to this. So I say that even though it looks quite dark behind me, the actual room I'm in isn't as dark as it probably appears on camera. And I think partly that's due to this polarizing filter in front of the lens, which does filter out. You can actually see how, as I turn it, you can see how at certain angles it blocks more or less of the light. So although it does appear very dark, I can see everything around me. I can see the other side of the office. I can see there's like a computer in the corner kind of putting out light. So eye strain for this, I haven't found an issue at all.
The next question was about pens.
Yes.
So in terms of colours of pens, there are a variety of different types. Maybe you'd like to mention the ones you're using?
Yeah, so my personal favourite, it's called an Expo Neon. And this one here, I think this is still my first pack that I'm going through. Personally, I quite like the blue colour. So this one here is blue. It does come in, they come in different colours. So there's a pink one. Now this one's maybe running out a little bit. And also I've got an orange one over here. The orange I think looks quite different. A lot of them do have quite a bluey tone because they're still being illuminated by blue LEDs in the glass. So even though it's orange, it's being lit up by blue, so it doesn't appear as orange as maybe true orange is. But there's definitely different colour pens that you can get. The other type, which is maybe a bit thinner, these are some quartet ones. And I think you can see it's a bit of a thinner line. I think this is the first time I've actually used it. So this one here is more of like a yellow colour. So again, just like maybe when you're presenting on the board, and I always tend to use different colours if I'm maybe going through a physics formula. I use like a black pen, a blue, a red and a green. It's definitely useful because you can use different colours of pen to highlight different bits of the diagram or whatever you might be explaining.
And how do you find the board to clean?
Yeah, so actually I think it's no different really to a normal whiteboard. And something that it took me 3 years of teaching to realise was that if you get one of these microfiber cloths, then when you use that on a whiteboard, it tends to really clean it. So you can see that some stuff here I put up a small time ago. Like the longer, if you come back to try and clean something which has been on there for a couple of days, it takes a bit more rubbing. But just using a microfiber cloth and not really any effort at all, I definitely feel that I don't think you can see any marks on the board. It's not 100% perfect. Initially when I got it, I thought I could use like a kind of spray, more like a glass cleaner and things, but I found that just using a microfiber cloth is absolutely fine. And that means that the board afterwards is completely dry. So you can just write on it as soon as you want to, really. So yeah, you don't need to wait for it to dry, so you can just write on it and then dry it off.
And so the next question is about the size of the board.
Yes.
I just want to mention the Learning Glass Lightboards come in a variety of sizes. So there are 4 different sizes: 30-inch, 45-inch, 68-inch, and 88-inch. But the board that Lewis is using is our 45-inch. So the second smallest. So the question is, how does it feel big enough for you? Because it is considerably smaller than, say, a normal whiteboard you'd use in a class.
Yeah, I think it's. I think like anything, you've probably got to plan what you're going to be putting on the board. As well, for a lot of this, I suppose I've been sort of in the middle, but I know that if I was to maybe sit to one side, I could, write quite a lot along here. It's not the same as a big whiteboard, which might be, 6 foot across or something, but you can definitely get plenty of text on here. And I find that if you try and have too much on here, then it can become quite complicated for the students. And I suppose what you can, of course, do is, you can write stuff on, you can take things off. But yeah, I would say that this one here, it's like, there's times I think, okay, it'd be nice to have a bigger board. But on the other hand, this one's easy to pick up and put on the tabletop. It's, I think this is the perfect size for if you were doing maybe online tutoring or delivering online content. So I think this size here works really well for me. So I haven't found it too small.
Great, thank you. So the next question is about, can you offload the content in a digital form? I believe I know the answer to that, but as in with first generation touchscreens. So just to mention that the Lightboard itself is completely analog. It's a completely hardware solution. There's no software running through the board itself.
Yeah. And so, for example, today, because I'm using OBS for this, all I did was click record on OBS, and that just records the screen. So it's not like, in a way, it's a bit like you can't really sort of download or digitally store what you've written on a whiteboard in, a traditional standard whiteboard. But I think what a lot of people don't, I think people think almost it's like computer generated. They think I'm using some special kind of wand that is tracked by some software and stuff, but it's purely a pen. But I think it does look really, I think it's really, really visual. So, and of course, if you've been used to doing Zoom meetings or any online delivery of stuff, then you can save the file, you can send it to students afterwards. You can just, if you wanted to, you could trim parts out or edit it down, and that could always then be emailed out to students after the event or shared on the school network or however you might be doing things in a kind of more corporate business format. But yeah, it's all fairly standard, kind of straightforward technology in that side of things.
And the next question is whether or not you need a particular software license to use it. Just to reiterate again, it is completely hardware. So you don't need a specific software, but Lewis does you use a couple of different softwares for live and for recorded, don't you?
Yeah, so if I do a pre-recorded, hopefully I spell that right. So if I have a pre-recorded video, then I tend to edit in Premiere Pro. So that's part of the Adobe suite. There's loads of other kind of things that you can use to edit videos, but that's something that I've bought that I've already used for other videos. And I just happen to take the content from the camera, I edit it in Premiere Pro, and then I upload to Vimeo or to YouTube. At the moment, I'm using something called OBS, something broadcasting software that's completely free to download. It allows you to do streaming. It allows you to do to actually save the footage. And again, that's just something that you basically have on your computer, and it just means that you can control if you've got multiple cameras, or you can make cameras zoom in or graphics appear. So, but again, this thing here is completely separate to the Lightboard. And all I do is I film what's happening on the Lightboard, and then I put that into Premiere Pro or into OBS.
And OBS, we should mention, is completely free. So you don't need to pay for it. You don't need a login. You simply download it on your computer, and it allows you to live stream. And as Lois showed, it allows you to also integrate digital assets. So you can, if you want to have PowerPoint slides, you can have them. If you want to have, videos, little animations, even transparent graphics, which you can then annotate on the Lightboard. It allows you to do some of that stuff live, which can be quite fun. The next question is about pens and equipment. So you can get that from us. We always have plenty of stock for pens, cleaning equipment, things like that. You can also source your own. You can find some of these even on Amazon and places like that. So they're readily available. You wouldn't get stuck.
Yeah, I think a lot of these pens are designed for just drawing on glass. So it's not necessarily that the pens are specific to Lightboards. It means that you could write on a window, or you could leave a note. I don't know why I do that rather than using a normal whiteboard, but they're very much just dry erase markers. I think you could probably try using just a normal board marker. I'm sure because there's ink in that, it'll appear up here. But these ones here, the neon markers, I suppose these also might work on a normal Lightboard as well, just to have a few more different. So these might work on a normal standard whiteboard, and that would give you a bigger range of colours as you're doing your normal explanations in class. So yeah, Expo Neon ones I think are really good.
Yes, yeah, I think you can use them on any sort of glass surface or whiteboard. The next question is, can you pull content from a textbook on the screen? So if you were using something like OBS or one of those software, yes, you can technically pull any asset. So if you had it digital, you would be able to show it in the exact same way that we're showing this PowerPoint slide here. It would simply just be a image of the text if you were doing it that way. I don't know if that's something that you've done at all.
It's not something I've done before, but I could see how in OBS you could have a split screen. So one half could be maybe you have another camera that's looking at a textbook page, or you could just have you present that image maybe, and then the other half is you presenting on screen. But again, I think it's like anything. I think if it's something that you want to have a look at, you can definitely play around with it, and there might be things that you've currently been trying online or with your own teaching that you can think, oh, I could do that I'm already doing, but I could have the addition of the Lightboard that could really help kind of bring it to life, or to look at that in a different way.
Great. And are there any other questions at all? We can always unmute as well. Prefer to ask in person. I guess I have a quick question, Lewis. Just if any of your students, sort of what their feedback's been, if they've sort of mentioned.
I think it's all been really positive. I mean, I suppose if they're going to be really negative, they don't really tell me. So I do have lots of videos that I've done on that I put up on TikTok. So they've had over 1 million views in total with using this Lightboard, and a lot of people say, "How do I write backwards?" But most of the comments, they aren't negative about the technology. It's all maybe they're asking about the physics that I'm delivering, which I think in a way is what you want. You don't want people to be focusing on the technology. You want people to be focusing on the content. And so most questions tend to be about, the physics that I've actually been explaining. A few people have liked the fact that in some of my other videos, I've got a T-shirt on that says physicsonline on my T-shirt. Now, in order to do that, I had to print out the logo backwards. So I would say if you are presenting, if you're wearing a shirt, if you're wearing a normal blouse or a plain T-shirt, it's absolutely fine. But just be aware, if you do have something with a logo on or some writing, that will all be mirrored in the output that you're getting. So, I think the only comment I've had is that people appreciate the fact I've kind of put the time into maybe kind of printing out the words backwards on the T-shirt, or occasionally I'll print out a document back to front. So if I want to show a document in the video, then I actually have to print out I have to print it out back to front so it looks the right way round in the finished video. But these are kind of things that you don't have to do, but it's more like I'm just I suppose trying to be creative to bring the subject to life, really.
And we have a question from Craig about any audio issues with reflection from the glass.
Not particularly. I mean, at the moment I'm just using a Yeti mic for the fact I'm on Zoom and things like that. A lot of the time I do have a boom mic. So this one here, it's a bit hard to see because it's a black thing on this, but this is a Rode mic. And all I do, this boom mic, I just make sure I have it above me somewhere like this, and the audio seems absolutely fine when I have this. It's just out of shot. And I think partly because of the setup in my office is I've got a big soft thing behind me. I've got some kind of acoustic foam in front of me. And although I am talking to a piece of glass, because I'm picking up the sound to the side of it, the audio isn't an issue at all. And if you ever did something where you weren't quite sure about the audio, there's always ways that you could maybe fix that in post-production. So so for example, in Premiere Pro, you can turn down the reverb and things like that if you really want to go for that quality. But I think most of the time, it's not something that students have even commented about in terms of the audio quality.
Great, thanks. The other thing to note is, particularly if you are using one of the larger Lightboards as well, another option is a lapel or Levian mic, which you can just clip onto you. So the sound is coming from wherever you are. If you're someone that is quite energetic and moves a lot, to get some consistent sound, a lapel mic works really nicely. Alyssa's asking about costs. So the Lightboards sort of range in a variety of costs. If it's okay with you, what we can do is we'll send them over after the call, so you have the full price list. So I won't list them all off now, but we'll get that to you. And I should also mention, if anyone has any questions after the call or any thoughts, we can always arrange a call with ourselves to answer any sort of specific questions about the Learning Glass Lightboards that we offer as well. Yes, thanks very much. Any other questions sort of for Lewis or about teaching, I guess?
Yeah, and if after this you want to get in contact with me, if you, I'll put my email address here. So if you have questions that you think about in terms of anything to do with the Lightboard or just general physics, I suppose, I will put my email address up here. So it's hello@physicsonline.com. Hopefully, is that all in the board? Have I just gone over the edge now with my settings? So physicsonline.com. You can always email me there. And again, if you want to see it in action, I can always send you links to the videos that I've done out there on YouTube if you can't find them already. But again, yeah, I can let you know how I found it if there's anything I haven't explained properly today. But yeah, and again, obviously I can copy you into any emails with Learning Glass if it's more of a technical or cost kind of side of things.
Great, thank you. It's just one quick question about if you were to stick anything to the glass, would you damage it?
I don't think so. I suppose it's just a piece of glass, really, isn't it? So I can't. Okay, I'm not going to say you can do this, but I would say that you could put like a post-it note here. You could probably put bits of blue tack. It's no more damaging than if it was being attached to a window that you could then take it off and then clean it. Because it's a hard surface, and the glass as well. I don't know how thick it is, but it's not a thin piece of glass. I don't think at any point, I'd break it. It's it's definitely a thick piece of glass. Yeah,
I have stuck post-it notes to it in the past, and it's been fine. So, yes, that's perfectly possible. Any sort of final questions? Sorry, I realize some people are popping off now. Thanks very much for joining. So. With time, will it get scratched? So you've been using yours for a while.
Yeah, I've not noticed any scratches at all, to be honest. I think again because glass is such a hard material, and you're using effectively a kind of a soft kind of felt tip on it, that I haven't found any scratching issues at all. Yeah, so it's been, and you know, when you actually clean it like this, it all looks fine. Yeah, so yeah, that's something I haven't even, again, to be honest, I haven't even considered scratching it yet. It's not really something I thought of, so it's definitely not an issue.
I should mention as well, the glass is on the Learning Glass Lightboard, the glass is what's called low iron tempered glass. So it's very strong. It goes through a tempering process, and it is then polished, goes through an industrial polishing process, and then surface treated just to make it really, really easy to clean. Because you don't want to, of course, ruin your teaching by being unable to clean the glass. So, yeah. But thanks very much, everyone. We appreciate you joining today. And like Lewis said, feel free to get in touch with him, or if you have any questions specifically about the learning glass models, or you'd like a personalized demonstration where we can talk you through a bit more about your specific use case or interest, just let us know. But yes, thanks again for your time and for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.